After all this, you still...
I still want that gas, yes. And you had better deliver.
This is Greenhouse Gaslighting, a free and independent podcast discussing society and culture with a left-wing, down-to-earth perspective. If you've ever wanted a deep dive on the issues, but felt like the bar for entry was too high, then you're in the right place. Okay. I'm still at last episode. We did the last in November, and
Yeah.
in some ways, it kind of feels like things have gotten so much worse, but they also feel fundamentally stuck. I don't know if that's the right way to describe the vibe lately, but it feels like a new year with the same shit.
Yeah, it's weird where I don't know, I'm trying to think of how best to describe the year we've been having, kind of on the political global issue front. And it's kind of odd in some ways. It's yeah, sort of the same old, but in other ways it's shit's coming out fast. It's insane to think we're only, halfway through February.
That has been the defining feature. I know that again, it's crazy to imagine that it's only been a year. It's crazy to even internalize that to some extent, because I just remember us naively talking about the Bannon Blitz and the tactics of exhaustion. It's another thing to live through them. Needless to say, and once again, we're just going to collapse the outline here. So probably the most recent thing I was reading, trying to make sense of things, was Ajay Singh Chowdhury's book, Exhausted of the Earth. And it's heavily influenced from an eco-socialist perspective. It was written in 23, so it could not have possibly accounted for everything 25 onwards. But I think a lot about that framework of exhaustion on a twofold front. One of capitalism as an extractive system, as the book outlines, but also exhaustion and how it plays out in just how saturated our media and culture has become with terrible things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's painted probably any discourse. It's painted with that invisible brush of exhaustion. I know that everyone talks about everything being dead, and I'm not trying to be grim about it, but it is palpable that amid all these horrible revelations, this system, even as it stands kind of resolute or unchanged, does look like it's cracking at the seams. It's bizarre to watch.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too, and as much as there's a lot of crackdowns or suggestions of crackdowns, right? If beyond just if we kind of think of the literal ones as we've seen with ICE, versus the ones that are more I'm going to say theoretical, because there's no real plan to actually accomplish any of these things with regards to voter suppression, right? National actions up and down the administration. How do we ensure that quote unquote the right people vote for the right leaders, right? This kind of thing. And all of this is very much blatant in its objective, right? It's that the system, this is the only way we can maintain the current paradigmingly. Maybe that we could debate whether that's pessimistic on their part, but yeah, you do really very much see the system cracking at its seams. You're seeing kind of I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it, just the way that so many so many of our conflicts feel increasingly petty, like more than they
Yeah.
ever have historically. As petty as we've made out various aspects of the culture war and things of that nature. We're hitting this new era that just sucks in a lot of ways for just how meaningless it all is.
I think that, yeah, it's
That's
grim.
not
It's
just like a
bleak.
long way. That wasn't like a long-winded way of saying not a whole lot, but it's just it's that it's just like something that I've been thinking about where it's just, there's uh, the fight over even kind of thinking more locally, right? The fight over the stupid bridge, right? Which is, to be fair, something that like Republicans have kind of had an issue with because there's donor money tied up in the Ambassador Bridge. Um, it is the Ambassador, the other one I'm thinking of.
Is this new one that they're building? I
There's the Gordie
really
Howe
haven't been able
Bridge,
to
but
keep up.
there's the current, because we have a couple different bridges to Canada.
And is this
Um,
the one, the privately held one by Maddie Maroon, the right wing money tied up in
so the
it? I'm
privately
trying to think.
there's the privately owned one, um, which is the one I was thinking. This is Yeah, that's the Ambassador. The Gordie
Okay, okay.
Howe Bridge is the one that is um very much like, you couldn't really ask for a better situation for it. Like it's very much designed to be like something that we would benefit from, right? Canada is fronting the cost and it's going to be paid for by, like, the US half is being paid for by um just,
Ohio, right? Yeah.
admittances basically.
Oh,
Um
okay, okay.
but yeah, like it's highly beneficial to have this constructed, but it's just like you've got all these just petty squabbles, and that just feels, again, comparatively not as important. Blue Water was the other one I was thinking of.
But
That's the
that's the
one
one over in Port
that's
Huron,
less.
right?
Yeah, it's the
Okay.
Ambassador is the main one where, like, yeah, like we've killed projects before because of the private ownership and wanting to support that. Which in general, I mean, like, yeah, and, that's probably not the most important for today, but like the fact that we're like, oh yeah, well, like the best, most heavy portal to the other side of to another country is held by private ownership. Like that just seems so many levels of messed up.
It, I'm kind of stunned at what to say because all that comes to mind is like, what a perfect way to sum up the present moment. And also that feels like a cliche. I I'm really worried. It's just
I mean,
I'm
it's
gonna laugh
practically
thinking
your
about it.
catchphrase on these episodes, right?
At this point, and especially in this time period, what else can I really say, right? The meaninglessness of it is probably the most palpable aspect. I think that's like spot on. I could definitely relate to that because it is petty to the point of the personality cult of Trump and like just Trump's personal whims, which at this point nothing about the man makes sense. Everything about him is collapsing at the seams, as it were. And also, the world's most indicted man indicted again. And I mean, probably what's been insane about everything post 2023, right, is just how inundated everyone has become with like violence, charged rhetoric, um, politically fraught situations starting to erupt again, and then with the second Trump term starting, just a daily blitz of cortisol anytime you open up your phone, right? And then to top it off, just like the complication of having AI generated propaganda anywhere, um, how media saturated our society is at this point, and how every week the Trump administration has just done something wildly disruptive and disorienting. I mean, just trying to count everything off my hands because it's mind-boggling. I don't know how else to say it. That's another catchphrase I have at this point. Um, just randomly bombing Caracas and kidnapping Maduro for no reason, escalating tensions with Iran, the whole weird show of Trump drunk tweeting at the EU saying he's going to take Greenland. And now, after that, basically went nowhere. Marco Rubio is now in Europe trying to smooth things over. It's incredibly confusing to think what is the posture of this administration other than to spread fear. And if that's not enough at the international front, you've got quite the 3 known kills of U.S. civilians at this point, doing God knows what else, whether it's what happens behind closed doors at detention centers, whether it's cases of violence that just don't make it out, don't get reported, um, literally running martial law across cities and areas that don't hard enough for Trump, which is again speaks to the pettiness of it all and how it just got so out of hand that it changes hands from one brown shirt bovino to Tom Homan, who was just in charge of the same as the last time around. It's an absurd time to be paying attention.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure there's a few things I was thinking of that kind of like snuck in there during that, but I know we're missing other things too. And I
It's
think like so
impossible
much of
to
this,
think about all of it. It's like,
yeah,
how do you hold all of these things in one hand?
and like when we're talking about like some of like the pettiness of it to like really illustrate this, like I mean, I think I don't know if you saw the other day when he's talking about the president or prime minister of Sweden. He gets every fact about this person wrong, by the way, including their gender, for for what it's worth. But he just like what's crazy, and I think this because this typifies, I think, everything that has come out of this administration is that he openly admits that like we're going to slap tariffs on them because I didn't really like this leader's attitude towards me.
Yep.
This isn't a national emergency, which is the entire legal pretext for the tariff power being unilateral, anyways. Um, which I mean clearly wasn't well thought out, but that's that we can have a whole broader conversation about presidential powers and we're not well thought out. But in like the specific respects of this, right, that you have a scenario where he openly admits that like I'm not following even like the bare minimum legal framework that exists to restrict some of these things. And it doesn't really matter either.
It almost begs the question, why put out the whole Project 2028 dossier if they were going to do it without the fig leaf of the law?
Yeah, and it's and then the idea too that we can not only is this whole nationalized election things. I'm not even convinced like Congress could get away with it, but you definitely can't like, well, if Congress doesn't pass something, I'm just going to do a unilateral executive order. It's like, well, that definitely doesn't work. Um, and it's just it's like all of this where it's like none of these like legal frameworks, and it's like they theoretically matter in terms of like the long term durability, but we've seen with just how kind of rigged the judiciary is as a whole. There really is so many like points where like even if a lower court finds this like illegal, the Fifth Circuit can say, oh well, we actually think it's really good. Actually, the Supreme Court can put a freeze on it until they give it a look. And all of these things where it's like there's very clearly like actionable harm done from the way we've handled immigration, from the way we've handled everything else, everything that the legal system is normally supposed to step in and prevent just isn't doing it.
And the stuff that's happening this time around is even more cartoonishly absurd than the first Trump term. I can. I mean,
Well,
you can
on that
compare them
point,
by the numbers.
I really want to highlight like this is again like this is probably a minor episode in all the grand scheme of things, but there was a video of ICE doing some arrests, and there's like this little tiny dog that comes up, and the agent just like sends it flying after kicking it. This is like again, is kicking a dog like the great like in terms of the maximal harm that it's done? I get it; it's lower on the bar, but like that, so many things ICE has done within these 2 months as well. It's just like I used to in class highlight like dog kicking is like there's this like politically neutral, like cartoonishly evil act you could do that people would be like appalled at, right? Like
Like zero
imagine like
percent approval rating. You would just be
right, yeah.
there.
It's like, it was like the way I would avoid having to deal with like a Republican going, well, actually, I think kicking dogs is good for the
Well,
country.
the problem is Christy Noam kind of broke the rules on that one.
Well, yeah, but like that's the thing is like we're breaking the rules and we're just like sticking with it, and it's like any example I've ever highlighted of like here's this cartoonishly evil act that you could do that you're not gonna like assume I'm talking about one side or the other, that I can just use as a quick example. Like here's a negative campaign ad saying that my opponent kicks puppies, and it's just like we've just done it all at this point of the administration. Like every example I would use of those has just been, which was done for like cartoonish hyperbole. Now it's like, well, I guess this is cool now in the United States. I don't know
It's
what to
like the
say.
most naked mask off shit. Like, I mean, if you take a look at like these ICE guys and like Bovino coming in 5'2" with his like big trench coat
Oh
and like the
yeah.
Nazi haircut, it's like th- they're dabbing on you, man. Like they want to look as fashed up as possible. Like they saw the whole like 2014 era Facebook memes of it could happen in America and said hell yeah, so I, it's kind of bewildering that people are seeing this in front of their eyes and I think correctly are like, yeah, fuck this. Anyone who's resisting in the ways that they can is doing a great job. But there's also just this like relinquished sense I see where it's like if you look at the polls, if you look at any if you talk to like normal people on the street about it, this stuff is broadly unpopular and yet it still is flying under the radar. No one's in charge. Like if you saw that thing recently, see this is what's the problem is with doing these kinds of episodes now, and it's not even because we took a hiatus. It's just this is how random everything fucking is now. They had that no fly zone over El Paso because they were trying to do like a drone shutdown
Yeah.
operation, and it was to shoot down a mylar balloon with a laser. So already I'm like, okay, what we got lasers now, and then it caused like such a stir with like aviation authorities that news coming out just really betrays the fact that's like who's in fucking charge anymore. We knew it was a clown show last time, but like you still had like how do I say this? That clique of like of the old neocon camp of your HR McMasters, your Rex Tillersons, your who else? Your Steve Mnuchins who like served as a fig leaf of knowing how to use the levers of power.
Yeah, and well, you just had like this sense of, and so I mean, full disclosure, I mean, not to like completely go random, but I mean, there's a few other points I
No,
want
go
to
for
kind of
it. Go for
touch
it.
on as well. But I'm teaching a class on like Trump and like the whole era that this has brought in for like politics. And some of the stuff we've talked about were like, the some of the major departures for Trump, like the first time around, that I don't think were fully actualized until this time, right? But like I look back to like some of those early campaign things, right? And like the big difference between him and other Republicans, one, as you've kind of called out, we didn't start with this on the outline, right? But we talked about before, his brand is kind of in response to Bush era.
Yeah.
And now we're just like embracing Bush era stuff, right? Like random military operations, like soft, like more or less explicit connection, like suggestions that we're going to go in and invade like these countries, Venezuela, possibly Greenland, even Iran. The other day, he's like talking about like, oh well, like we're gonna keep bombing them, even if it means we're gonna have to like pick up the ash at the end of this. Like what? Like there's no point to this. We just want to fight. Which is even like making the Bush administration look like I don't know, Greenpeace or something. Like it's so absurd. But one of his big things, right, was the fact that he like kind of called the party out on a lot of its bluffs. You look at the way they were talking about immigration in pre 2016. You look at the way they were talking about um terrorism, right? The idea was that because Obama won't say radical Islamic terrorist, there is a suicide bomber waiting for you explicitly down the street. And I remember like watching those debates at the time where it's just like this is such a petty difference that it's just a label. And like that label, to be fair, like the radical jihadists versus radical Islamic terrorists, like that does harm to different groups. But if you're like not, if you're on the outside, like it was always like, how are you someone who's like who buys into this, that like this matters, that the change on this label suddenly makes you more safe. But the point is like Trump comes in and he suggests these things that were already like kind of illegal, but they really try to work overtime to make them legal, right? Your Muslim bans, your um various other things, right? The initial tariffs that were far less severe than these ones. But this time around, there really isn't like, there's really not that pretext that we have to actually justify this anymore. Even at the Supreme Court level, they're not really like, well, we need to like kind of provide a like legally robust statement that really explains this. It's just like, no, like this is all just vibes. We will still have the legal citations, but they're not, we clearly aren't that influenced by them, things like that. And then to an earlier point that you made as well for the polling and whatnot, we just dropped, Gallup just dropped a presidential approval polls. First time in 88 years. So, and I think there's like a broader debate that we can have on how much, public opinion has mattered to this administration anyways. I think very little, but to the extent now that it's like we can't, just because all it really does is harm his fragile ego, we can't even have that.
It is insane to kind of put it all together and think about this implication that this is all a petty personal response to the Bush era from Trump. This is quite literally him saying, this is how I would have done it. But then also to internalize that he fundamentally looks at the world with the same neocon position is insane. And I think like exactly what you were saying is they were working overtime to make the excuses. That was the Bush administration's, bread and butter.
Yeah.
Was working overtime to make up excuses, but I think that is the fundamental difference.
All of it.
WMDs had to be, they workshop the fuck out of that one.
Operation ties to Al Qaeda, like
right. The axis of evil. Like again, just I'm thinking about like John Yoo and like the torture memos and how like that legal architecture plays big time into how the Bush administration was like, we'll pull from the Federalist Papers, this like the fig leaf of American civic religion that they were trying to invoke, right? Like, yes, we want to do this insane shit where now that the Soviet Union is gone, we need to find new enemies. But we'll still work with the assumption that there are people we have to justify ourselves to, even though we're going to lie our asses off. And the Trump administration's fully unique in that sense of like, we'll still do that, but we don't care. Like Bush's problem is that he didn't want it bad enough, which is an insane thing to think about. And that's also the thesis of I brought this up again in the last again, this will be a double release today, so I'm kind of that's kind of cool actually. This is the second time I'm talking about Spencer Ackerman's Reign of Terror today, where it's not that uncommon or that out there of a lens to try and view this present moment as a response to 9/11 onwards. I mean, just look at like the founding of DHS to ICE. Like it's
Yep.
not that far of a bridge. And the fact that like anytime shit isn't going well for Trump, as we're seeing with the release of the Epstein files and shit, which we'll have to get into that, he pulls out a page from the neocon playbook. So we'll kidnap Maduro because Venezuela was on the playbook, even though Chavez has been out of the picture for a minute. We'll pull up Iran and do Israel a favor that way. And
Well, and some of these
I,
have been like the pet projects of a lot of politicians for a very long time. Some who are closely affiliated or in the administration, right? Like Venezuela was a big Rubio thing.
yeah, yeah,
Iran, I mean, go through a laundry list. And it probably doesn't help too that the response from Democrats has basically been, well, hold on, you didn't let us know in advance. Not that
right.
we oppose the action. And, some people are like, well, they kind of have to like ride this like, weird space in terms of public sentiment, but I just don't see it in that way. Like where it's like it's rather obvious on certain issues, right? The fact that like, on the ICE issue as well, right? The fact that something like abolish ICE has positive approval rating, right? Not like, oh, like, do you approve, disapprove of ICE? It's like the extreme position, getting rid of an entire department has positive views, and yet you have Democrats where they're just not really willing to even pay lip service to lesser alternatives on that. Just like, oh, well, like, let's give them body cams, because it's not like they filmed their own murderers.
And I almost
Like,
wonder if that comes from the fact that because under the Biden era, the Democrats fundamentally had to flip flop on that, on their earlier position of cracking down on ICE. And I kind of wonder if it's like
well,
they can only pay. Go ahead, go ahead.
it's kind of an ongoing thing, right? I mean, ICE, like as you noted, right, with the DHS, it hasn't existed that long, despite the
Mhm.
fact that we treat it like it's, basically been there since the founding. It's only a post 9/11 thing, but there was a clip from Hillary Clinton today or yesterday where she's talking about under Biden and Obama we had more deportations. Like this was as a good thing. Um and I think that's like the thing that like Democrats keep riding, and it's like I don't necessarily understand the calculation personally with what they're doing on immigration, right? Where it's like, okay, like if you're as anti-immigration as the Republicans, uh, just campaign on that. Like, you know what I mean? Like you campaign on this like sort of softer approach, but we're the ones who get it done a little bit more competently. But you don't really iterate that much, and I mean, like obviously, like I don't agree with like the idea that like, oh no, they should embrace like being anti-immigrant per se, but it's just I just don't understand the calculus at all.
I mean, to me, I, in trying to understand it, because I've walked that path from Obama diehard to jaded socialist, right? And I think what it comes down to, whether the Democratic Party does this intentionally or whether they exist in like their own Dunning-Kruger hell, they're trying to really launder the reality of immigration as a explanation for how labor is structured, right? And suffice it to say, unpacking that exposes way too many uncomfortable realities of who makes up our labor force, how it's
Sure.
racialized, how it, is distributed along these unfair lines, who is allowed certain rights and who isn't. If you start unpacking that, um, you kind of you kind of just lay the entire cruelty of the system bare at a point, right? And I'm not even just saying that as, um, it only benefits immigrants to talk about that. It probably benefits white people to talk about that, probably benefits other endemic populations to benefit that too, because America keeps ducking the race question. It keeps ducking the labor question. That's
Hmm.
the only real calculus I can really think of is whether they do it
That's fair.
intentionally
Yeah.
or not. That if it's always going to be befuddled if you don't talk about it in those stark terms. And I'm saying that as someone who believes in multiculturalism. Like I do believe that like we can all hold hands and kumbaya, but I know wokeism doesn't pull well.
I don't know. We're entering the era of the resurgence of dark woke, according to the internet. So
Woke-lash
who
is
knows?
woke-lash happening?
I guess. I don't know if you saw there was one of the latest like viral examples was the other day there was like some high school protest and someone brought a like
Oh,
I
the school
love
walkout?
ice. It might have been that, but yeah, someone had like he brought an I love ice
Oh, and he got his
poster.
lights knocked the
Oh
fuck
yeah,
out by that kid. Oh
yeah.
my God. If you are that kid and you're listening to this, we are raising a scholarship fund for you. Realistically, we can only send you $25 total, but we'll
Yeah,
raise it for you.
I was like, let's not, commit ourselves legally to
I can
anything here.
legally commit myself to $25 max. Uh, but it is kind of indicative that where people are fighting back, they're fighting back quite impressively because we kind of talked about this in an earlier episode of the kind of sadder aspect of environmental disasters and how you're going to see bad things happen through your phone until it happens to you. But as we're seeing with things like ice, for example, it's scarily as close as an environmental disaster of
Sure.
ice pulling up and causing chaos in your neighborhood. And the thing that got me, because again, of the three people shot, one was African American and two were white. When I found out about the shooting of Renee Good, there was a piece of me that was like, it much again like you were talking about with like those unspoken rules that would render you with 0% approval, like kicking a puppy. I not to play into the whole culture war narrative, but they shot a white woman. You would
Yeah.
think that would be like, and it probably did mobilize um the kind of slowdown or at least this reversal we're seeing from Bovino to Homan of responding to the public pressure while also doubling down. But I still think they're on standby because they still have a little bit of control over like National Guard bases. They're still not fully scaled down. Tom Homan again, he's moving in the wrong direction. I don't think it's a reprieve from what we're seeing. And it kind of it needs to be said, right, that as America's seeking a more like hawkish posture internationally, it should also reflect on people. Why is it that we're also employing a siege mentality on our own cities?
Yeah, I think it is, and to some extent, right? And I think one of the scarier things I think that's been like exposed by all of this isn't just the actions of what's happening, right? Like I mean, like obviously that's terrifying as well, right? The fact that American citizens who are like beyond just the way that they could treat immigrants, which I don't think it would be justified against them either, but just thinking about it from the perspective of the
Just
fact
from
that
their
like we're
own
willing to
cold
cross the bar.
logic.
Right, the fact that we're willing to cross the bar on American citizens, that's obviously scary enough, but to me, it's sort of it's the response that we're seeing from the right on this, right? Especially the administration. Um, but even just like kind of your rank and file members, right, where they are embracing this idea that like, well, we actually have some videos of him kicking some taillights. Well, she had pronouns in her bio, so she probably deserved it. All of this stuff, which is just like really gross, especially after the way they had just, like made it so like if you are not bending over backwards to mourn Charlie Kirk, you
Right.
should be fired, deported, expunged from polite society, if not this planet. Yet, every time someone who is, I don't even know how much we really know about the ideologies of these people per se. Not that that should matter, but because they're aesthetically not right wing, it's open season.
And it really plays into that. I forgot whose tweet it was, but the description of ICE agents as the army of the unemployable against the employed. Um,
It's pretty good.
there's no other way to really say it. Like it is darkly funny to describe it that way, but these are guys who were just, as soon as they understood the implications that they were going to get to play cops and beat the lights out of whoever they wanted, they signed up. And then the funny part in all of this, because I know there was some reporting that was coming out about um, ICE hiring being like super quick, no real background investigations, you know, journalists who would be throwing up flags in a normal interview like this are getting through
Yeah.
like spot free. So then the funny thing that's come out in all of this is ICE agents aren't getting paid.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, fuck you, buddy. I don't feel bad for you, but also it's like, what did you guys think? They wanted you guys. I would even go as far as to say that this might be the first time we see anyone get punished because they're going to set these bozos up to take the fall. It won't be Christy Nome that ever sees the light of day, even though she should. Or sorry, the light of her. She will never see her day in court for this.
Well, which
But
is, I mean, like, I didn't necessarily expect to see her day in court, but like, isn't that kind of wild that there's just like that even the idea that she could lose her office over this stuff is just completely, like you just couldn't see it happening.
even though
Like
like
considering
that's
how
the
many
bare
people were
minimum of what should
fired.
happen.
Yeah, considering like how many people were fired in the first Trump administration. The fact that these folks, because none of them are like the ones who are going to like, quit for moral reasons, right? Unlike the first administration, which I'm not going to say that, you have a ton of, paragons of moral virtue there, right? But a lot of them were forced out because they had a moral stance that was, you know, not compatible with the administrations. But the fact that like nowadays, like, that Kristi Noem doesn't even seem fireable, impeachable for all of this is crazy.
I mean, we could probably spend all day until we're like sore in the jaw talking about how shameless and craven these people are, but they're no justice. I've never seen anything so shameful. Um,
Yeah.
I don't. We could even get into Pete Hegseth's just like blubbering. We could get into the fact that Marco Rubio is engineering all this to fix on his new eye on the prize, which is cutting off oil to Cuba. We could talk about huh, the fact that Elon Musk just came and went with Doge, never really had any authority to do the shit he did, but the cuts still last.
And
So
did some insane things in terms of like, it just came out with some leaks for like Medicaid and stuff like that, right? Like all kinds of government data that was basically just pawned off beyond just the
exactly.
cuts themselves.
It's like they took federal files and like put them into Grok. Like let's be oh, and then that's the other thing that's getting me. And the most recent episode we did was about AI, so I forgot to even bring this up. But like, Hegseth basically saying at gunpoint, like, you guys are going to use Grok at the Pentagon? Are you fucking
Oh yeah, there's
kidding
so
me?
many. Yeah, super weird.
We won't be able to get into all of it. We're just not going to have time to get into it. I had
I
something
think
to,
this. Well, this was a way more minor, but like I think it was Rubio who forced them to start using Times New Roman again. Um,
who fucking cares? Oh my god.
I get them to use a proper American typeface. Times New Roman.
Oh my god. So I think when I was writing this outline, I'm just looking at it now. So I think in January is when I started writing this. So not too long ago, I said to Josh, something I'm thinking on, isn't it wild that the Trump brand was a response to the Bush era, only now to take that era's successes to the max? And literally the next day is when like all the Epstein file shit started popping off. So the next day, Bush era foreign policy with Epstein characteristics. Um,
And to be
I
fair,
think that
some
yeah,
Bush administration officials came out looking, okay. Dick
it's
Cheney just did it for a love of the game.
that's why you gotta respect. You gotta
There's no
respect anyone who
blackmail.
did blackmail. No, he was do.
Yeah,
No need to blackmail when you got torture.
right.
Oh my gosh. Oh my fucking god. Um, I think the most recent development in the Epstein saga probably was Pam Bondi's absolute freak out. I didn't even see all the clips yet. I only know that she was talking about, don't you know the Nasdaq was at 50,000? I don't even know how
Yeah,
she said it, but I didn't realize this until earlier. That's like you had Epstein victims in the front row while she's having this, like,
yeah.
full on just desperate freak out to try to defend Trump's alleged good name. Um just the fact that like you had the entire Trump base, or not the entire Trump base, but you had like, as a portion of the Trump base, the QAnon conspiracists, the fact that um all the stuff about Epstein had been out for a minute, and they had been trying to paint this picture of Trump as somehow immune from it to like really just twist with reality and shit. Um,
Well, and for what it's worth, I think like in terms of legal consequences, he and probably almost everyone on here is legally immune. Like
that's
I don't
the
think I don't think there's a single name on there that will face consequences.
and that's probably what my big worry is about the release of the files. So, as someone who unfortunately has been following the case for too long, who I had an interest in parapolitics and stuff before, um, I'm really falling back on something I've said before, right? Which is in other parts of the world they don't call it parapolitics, it's just politics. I don't think um, there's a way to get at this more clearly than of course rich people get up to shit like this. Like it doesn't need to be deeper than that. But one thing I think about with the release of the files and how like there's just interest in the really gory details of everything that's happened and not the implications of what it all means, um
Hmm.
is it's going to be a spectacle to continue to distract because they know they can't distract people from the files. So dragging people out center stage, making them the public of whether it's the victims being the targets of gossip and targets of attacks from the Trump base, whether it's the release of like really gross and salacious files, um, anything that's going to get released is going to continue to be done so in a way to maximize distraction and shock. And you can see
Yeah,
that
well,
with how selective it is.
yeah, and I was gonna say like with some of what came out, it was like this was always, and I always kind of thought the whole like push to have them released was mostly just kind of petty backlash. I don't think anyone thought there would be like meaningful consequences for Trump or other people in there. But I think it was just kind of like, if they're going to make a big deal out of this, like, let's make them make fools of themselves. But looking at a lot of what was in like the first batch that was released, it's like, yeah, this is why you don't just like throw out like full case files and stuff like this, right? Because there's so much stuff in there that is probably not true. Right, like, because there's just, like, every allegation in there, everything that they were going to investigate, that they did investigate, and, like, there's some stuff that's just it almost certainly isn't corroborated. There's probably people having weird mental breaks that the FBI was interacting with in the process leading to this, and it did, like, again, like, I think to your point, right, I think a lot of this was intended to be a distraction, and a lot of that was primarily to distract and with stuff that like you can just be like, okay, yeah, like look how crazy some of this stuff is, even though a lot of it is still at the end of the day true.
Right, and it's like I wish people were taking this with like a little bit more of just how serious the implications are. So
And it is mostly just a meme, right? Like at this point,
what
like
what and that's the thing. They literally talked about
anything
this in the
involving Stephen
files.
Hawking is just
It's been turned into a meme, and like they literally talked about this in the files about how they intended to use mimetic warfare to numb people to this stuff. How Epstein had a hand in everything from 4chan to crypto to the 2008 crash. And it's like, yeah, the level of influence of the people he was talking to, it's no surprise he was at the scene of the crime. My real theory, and I'm trying to say this with like full implication of what this means, is that Jeffrey Epstein may have been Israeli intelligence. Because why else was he able to talk to so many people in the American, British, European, and Russian elite? You know what I'm saying? But even that being said, there's strong implications of what saying something like that means, which is why I won't go any further.
sure, yeah.
But I've seen people take it to all sorts of absurd extremes, whether it's the memification of it, whether it's used as like a back-fisted way to do like anti-Semitism as a vulgar critique of Zionism, whether it's a way to do like selective interpretation of the files as yes, the Democrats are mostly implicated in this and not my guys, or I've seen vice versa, where it's seen universally as yeah, all the Republicans are in it and not the reality of hey, so many people who hold influence on our society were cavorting with this guy. What does that kind of say about if not their proclivities, the fact that if you take them at their word, they say they were bamboozled by this guy. And if you could be bamboozled so easily, what does that say about your judgment? But also, why would you then demand legitimacy for some of this stuff? And I'm talking specifically about like guys like Larry Summers, for example, being asking this guy for dating advice well after he'd had his court date. So
Well, and I think
the
too, so much of like the surrounding discourse as well, I think exposed the extent to which these people just either felt that there was completely no consequences, like even from like a parasocial perspective, or just it never dawned on them that they might be exposed, right? The fact that Elon was so adamant about like outing people in the files, that he was never in them, and yet like he is featured in some of, not to
most
embrace
embarrassing
gamification.
emails.
Yeah, some of the most embarrassing emails are from him, where it's like, yeah, like I don't even really want to deal with this guy. Um, but he's just, like that Elon is this like insufferable hanger on in this, to take one out of their books, cabal of pedophiles.
And this is the thing that like it just rubs me in a way that makes me paranoid is consider Ghislaine's connection to the tabloid industry through her father and how some of the way that this ends up getting discussed is through that same British tabloid lens. And I would just urge people, like, I understand why information may get presented to you that way, but like let's not forget like the root issue here, which is that there hasn't really been justice for the victims. There hasn't really been a real
Yeah.
investigation into this. That if we're ready to do that as a society to investigate this, we have to be ready for the real consequences, which like at the bare minimum would be like several influential people being stripped of their power and titles. Do we live in a society that's capable of executing that?
But
Ideally, we should, but I would argue circumstances aren't there yet.
yeah, that's kind of
To
where
be
I'm at
very
too.
charitable.
Yeah. And I think too, like some of this also like kind of like, consequently, I think really speaks to um sort of the divides in this country, right? And like that's not a subject that I really talk about as much just because, I mean, I think to some extent we've kind of alluded to this over the years, right? That's the idea that to some extent the divisions are exposing like real conflicts that were ignored, right? That like, we had this, the civility politics shape is just kind of it benefits a certain type of individual more than it does others.
Hmm.
Um, and that while that is the case, I think that there's, when we see all these same people who are like insisting that the files pre-election were like the most important thing ever, when they're confronted with, their messianic figures, for lack of a better description, in the
Right.
files, it doesn't really seem to budge the needle much for them.
Yeah, because they're either in full on denial. Like, I think everyone was really. I know why someone would enjoy watching a video of a Trump supporter, like, really freaking out about the implications of the Epstein files.
Yeah,
And all I can say is that's terminal West Wing brain. Yes,
100%.
it would be nice to see, someone grapple with the consequences of their actions because, we live in the era of leopards ate my face. You would love to see someone get their comeuppance, but that's,
We're all lovers of
I mean,
fiction.
right, exactly, exactly. So it's like you'll either see these people double down or worse. Like you saw those early defenses of people trying to be like, actually, it was cool. They would always like. I mean, you saw this with like the Reason magazine. You had Megan McArdle go on a podcast talking about how well it's not as bad because he was only going after 16-year-olds, and it's like as if that's better, as if that's fucking better. Megan, are you fucking
Well,
kidding me?
it's the same thing. And I've got 2 points on it. It's the same thing where like because like Marco Rubio has been one of the more vocal like products of divorce are might as well just struggle the like strangle them in their sleep, like they're worthless, they're doomed to mediocrity, et cetera, et cetera. Like divorce is the worst thing you could happen to you in society. And I always thought that was problematic, especially coming from that background
Yeah,
of being, raised by, a single parent household. And then
Marco
people are like,
Rubio
well,
or
no,
JD
no, you don't.
Vance?
Marco Rubio, JD Vance is
Oh
probably
my.
done in this too, but
Okay.
Rubio's been in the business longer and has also been doing it for a really long time. I mean, even when he was running for president the first time, this came up. And I just remember when I would like, say like this is something I really didn't like about him. Like, oh no, you don't get it. He's talking. It's a dog whistle. He's talking about black people. I'm like, oh,
Right.
well, problem solved, I guess, right? Like, like I'm like, oh, because it's not about me, I shouldn't be offended. Like that's so stupid. Um, but the other point I was going to get at too was with the like denial. God, there was a one of my relatives on Facebook. I had to like just remove because I was like 2 seconds away from snapping. Where he had made like shared, and he had some deplorable posts um, for a while now. But it was just this was like when the files came out, and it was like like every report is like Trump has mentioned 500 plus times in the files. just what was, unredacted. And
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh, the liberals, they wanted him in this so much, and he's not even mentioned once." And it's like, how fucking stupid do you have to be this in denial? Like, that's insane. Like, the level of denial. Like, I mean, it's like, I mean, I don't even know what's worse, right? Just denying it entirely, or just kind of the other modal attitude of like, I actually don't give a fuck. I lied. I don't really care. Or I cared when I thought it wasn't going to be about him. Now that it is, I just don't care. I'm not. I
Right.
mean, at least that I think is more honest. That like always just saw this as a cynical tool to justify my worldview. Um, yeah, it's just like it's again. I wasn't looking for that. Leopard ate my face moment of like, oh, I finally see the error of my ways. But man, I was hoping for something a little bit more than the level of just unmoved, unconcerned.
It's just, again, like, it speaks to the exhaustion that's at play, right? That I just keep harping
Sure.
on this because it defines the moment so much. Um, so I mean, in Chowdhury's book, he talks about the extractive circuit, right? Um, of how entire areas of the economy are centered around depleting parts of the earth or depleting
Yeah.
people's labor and shit, right? And if you pair that reality of people being broken down, worn down, the world around them being broken down, worn down, and you just combine that with like the de- I shouldn't say the word deployment of the files because I'm not I don't like to talk about present events as if the fix is in because I have no way to do that. It's much easier to
Sure.
say that about things that have happened in the past when you have better context. Right now, you can only speculate about what happens. The manner in which the files were simultaneously suppressed and released, along with just the worsening of global events, the overwhelming sense of precarity that has been trending for the past couple years economically, with things just getting dire for people depending on their circumstances. And I'm talking about if you live in a community that's being surveilled by ICE, if you or are in precarious circumstances, whatever the case is. Um, you're not in a position where you can rationally think about these things. You're not in a position where you can rationally take it all in. You can't look at things holistically in that same way. And I think that's created a situation now where people are checked out or burned out in some ways. And I think there's two modalities to it of people who are well meaning but are fundamentally out of the loop, or
Yeah.
people who take pride in being out of the loop, people who have kind of internalized that callousness and cruelty. So when they learn about it, they're like, well, whatever, they probably deserved it.
Well, and we've just kind of become a culture that, on some level, just celebrates ignorance as a
Yeah.
virtue and anti-intellectualism as a whole.
Yeah. I think it's never been more prevalent until lately, I'd say, right? Because first Trump term, you at least had like the pseudo intellectuals. You had your intellectual dark web. You had your Petersons. You had your Josh Hallways, who were like
Yeah.
trying to build, the kind of rhetorical lineage for what they called national conservatism. And
Mhm.
I mean, we know nothing exists for it. It's not real.
Yeah.
I don't even know where I'm going with this. It's what are we fucking doing? That's the question I ask every day. Like, what are we fucking doing? Why
Well,
do
until
all
now,
this?
I'm not recording, but that's a
No, we're
separate issue.
recording. Don't say what.
I
You
said, well,
scared me
until
for a second.
now. I said, well, until now, we weren't,
No, you scared me. I was like, oh
every
no,
other
did
day.
I not
Yeah.
hit record? Oh no.
Can you imagine? Um,
And then
but yeah, no,
I think
I think you're right.
but
There's just this overwhelming sense of malaise kind of at all times. And just not really, I mean, I don't want to like necessarily extol the virtues of getting, some type of, you know, adopting your own messianic figure to save the day. But there's this sense, right, that people have of just, looking for someone to at least step up their game.
right, which is kind of why I see this like energy behind figures like Zoran or even Gavin. It is this kind of like hope for someone to. I mean, it is hoping for a hero in a way. And I think with Zoran, it's like the old school um, democratic socialist promise, or with someone like Gavin, it's he will be there to wipe the floor with your enemy of the week.
Well, and I
Um,
think that like too with Gavin, so much of it is that I think the ball has just been completely dropped to the point where like anyone putting up any form of lukewarm resistance is seen as a huge difference comparatively.
I guess that's fair enough. That's how you get your Andrew Cuomo's in the pandemic, you know.
Yeah, because I mean, I think that was another one too, where it was just kind of God. I just remember with Cuomo, just I don't think anyone has ever had their career destroyed in real time in a more deserved manner than him.
Oh my gosh. And then to do a Pain Piggy run as New York mayor.
Oh yeah,
Oh my gosh. I mean, I don't know. So one thing I do want to think on is like it's not enough to demand a hero come out, right? Like I don't think, or at least I'm saying this about myself, I need to imagine what I would be doing in my life to improve things in some way. Like, why do we not see ourselves as people who can fight back? And part of it is just we're all so captured by the system. We're all kind of powerless, but at the same time, we see videos like we see that kid absolutely punch out the kid who says I love ICE. You see people fight back against ICE agents in their communities. You see people saying and standing up for the right things. So I think it's not enough to be inspired. One should know what to do. Finding that out has been difficult, of course. Um, I don't know.
yeah, I think that's
Powerlessness
fair.
is hard to fight against right now.
Yeah, for sure. And there's like kind of just the general questions, right? Of what you know is the kid punching the ice supporter? Like, what does that accomplish? I mean, like, there's certain things where I think it's cathartic seeing it happen, but it's not really.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of
So
the way I would.
because I think people do want to fight back. I don't know what that looks like in everyone's individual life, but I think with 2026 midterms coming up, um, is the woke lash going to happen as promised? You know, do we do the blue wave of, let's see, was that 2016? Are we going to see a replay of 2018?
18.
Yeah.
I would be stunned if we don't, right? And I mean, I don't really see practicality of what the administration is proposing with elections as like I don't see it as something that is like inevitable or that is going to happen, right? So I'm not as concerned that that is going to get in the way of that. But I think that it's hard to fathom we don't get just a major sweep, right? The Senate probably not. Though there's chances there too, however slim. But the House, it's really hard to imagine that not going, in the Democratic way. And I'm curious too with the way with like all these redistricting wars. I'm curious to see what that does as well because I think some of the data, like you look at kind of what they were basing it on when they were drawing these new districts, they could be really wrong with how like we were already seeing movements in the opinions of certain demographics that, everyone shifted to the right more or less in 2024. And I don't think that that was necessarily a long-term projection.
I would agree with that. I think everyone took specifically the cited push of Latino voters in certain blocks shifting to the right.
Yeah.
And I think with, how everything has played out this year.
Well, it wasn't just them. I mean, it was, you look at American voters. Republicans didn't win that demographic, but there was a shift.
Right.
Younger voters, there was a shift pretty much across the board. Every demographic, how you broke it down, there was a shift.
Right. And I think that's the thing is the jury is out on how lasting of a shift that is. Yeah. And I think this is something that they've said on Chapo a couple times. And I don't know if Felix said this or Edinger Mentum said this, but the Republicans have taken this bizarre assumption to heart. Just because they win an election, it means that 100% of people agree with 100% of all the things they do. And they're not ready for the consequences of that. So even if, I'm in no position to project or predict anything, but it may be plausible that we continue to see maybe breakneck shifts in perspective among demographics cycle to cycle, but it's very foolish to assume that they're going to be lasting in any way, shape, or form. I think go ahead.
I was gonna say, and look at how dismissive, like how much it was dismissed, how foolish Democratic projections were on those same things, right? The idea of that they're going to win Texas and all these southern states because of general trends with the Hispanic population, right? And that was at least based on more realistic data than what we're seeing today.
Right, and it kind of goes to show it runs both ways. You have to be able to, one, if you take a voting block for granted, you have to have something concrete for them other than legacy if you want to have an earned constituency. It's not enough to just get by on historic relations. And I'm talking specifically about, the way the black vote is talked about in certain Democratic circles or even the minority vote more largely. Mm-hmm. But also, then it's the opposite way where you had these different gains by the right in these different groups and fundamentally immediately screwing them over. Now, again, lepers ate my face. It's hard not to laugh. But people are still going to remember that they got screwed over. Some of them may remember who screwed them over. And I'm kind of amused that they're surprised that people remember things like that. That they're surprised that someone remembered that they bit the hand that fed them,
Sure, yeah. And like I said, we'll see kind of how that goes. I mean, I think prototypically we conceive of most of the American voters as kind of having like the memory of a goldfish, right? That's kind of how we end
Yeah.
up with Trump too in the first place. And while that is, I would say, still very much true in a lot of ways, I think there's a little bit more nuance than what they think of.
No, there's considerably more nuance. And I think, again, the consequences of social media being rolled out and forced on the population the way it has is it's only going to make, I mean, I can't say this definitively. I think someone with more research capability, I think, if you're looking for a research idea, steal this from me. Start looking at, does the increase of political media, the ways in which social media has been distributed, does that introduce more entropy into the process? Does that introduce more entropy in predicting results?
Yeah, it's an interesting
Because
one.
as you've said, like, we live in a kind of anti-intellectual environment now, and one of the trends I've seen that's refreshing, at least in my personal life, is people who may have come up in an anti-intellectual environment now wanting to get into some of these things and trying to figure out where to start. Um, and they're kind of done this dual disservice of not having access to, like, good political education, but then also trying to express their well-meaning views through like improper framing.
Yeah.
So that's another demographic. Just again, lots of people in your life because they mean well and they want to learn. Let them rise. Let them rise to the moment. But I mean, I don't know. Collectively, I feel like I have not been the same since October 7th, 2023. And I'm not saying that to sound like, a Hasbarist lobbyist, right? I'm saying that as like that was the real vibe shift for everything lately. And it's not easy to keep up with everything lately. I faulted myself a lot for this in trying to figure out how do you do a podcast like this one in the times that we live in, because everything we did before was really informed by being a product of the Biden era, right? Everything we're doing is a consequence of Trumpism losing at the ballot box and a kind of hegemonic, oh my God, um, phantom of like a liberal past kind of dominating the public discourse. And how that was being kind of countered and peppered by this new emergent right that had been mutated by the first Trump term, right? And now that we live in the twilight of that and we're in this, I wouldn't call it a brave new world, but
A
I
little
would be
cowardly for that.
it is definitely because when I first theorized this episode, the way things were going, I thought you could look at everything that's happened as just look at the Bush administration and how that ran, and you can probably predict the next step. And to some extent, maybe that holds water. But because of how complex things have gotten, whether that's with the advent of social media, whether that's
I
the
also,
go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I also think things are less stable now, right? Like
Yeah,
we've seen kind of these like major shifts, right? Like maybe not on everything, right? Like we already talked about immigration, how maybe it wasn't that different under Biden, other than like you weren't getting like ICE patrols like this, right? There wasn't the idea that you're like actively terrorizing communities in the same capacity. But we've gone from this is highly unusual in like the modern context to have like three one-term presidents back to back.
yeah,
Right. I mean, like this is assuming that like again, I mean, I think one way or the other, whether you believe he'll try to run again somehow or whatnot, I think the fact of the matter is that like look at the man, he's not making it. to 8 years from now.
He isn't, and then that's the thing is what comes after this, because obviously the consultant class, those in charge, may still see themselves as just like the natural progression of what was there before, but it's very hard to imagine the Democrats having a new figure to rally behind after Kamala. Like, I know she might want to run again, but it doesn't feel real to me. I'm sorry. I don't know what that constituency is.
It's interesting because I feel like that constituency is almost imagined.
Yeah.
Because there was someone who I can't remember what show James Carville was on, but this guy just like gave it to him because he said that like he couldn't see Harris being the nominee in the future. And they're like, "Well, what do you mean she's black?" Which what a way to put that, right? Like, but yeah, like, it was just like one of those things that was kind of odd to me that she just doesn't like. It's weird. Like, I think her memoirs, from what I understand, they pissed off a lot of the consultants, which that's not the be all end all in
Right.
terms of actually getting the nomination, but it pissed off a lot of people there. It kind of pissed off some members of the voting public who feel that Joe Biden was slighted. I like to think that that's probably a pretty small group, but you never know. But it's also the only thing in my mind that gives her like an even like slight chance
Yeah.
of possibly being the nominee, just because it at least puts her in like this space where it's like, well, like she openly admits that her hands were tied, right? She wasn't the candidate that she wanted to be, and that gives her something versus like the absolute nothing that she has right now, right? Where it's like she lost. My life is over because she lost. I blame her to some extent for it. Like that general mentality that I think does definitely exist.
Which is somewhat canny of her to start distancing herself from Biden. Something I noticed too is Josh Shapiro was also making that same tactic as well. I did not read any of these people's biographies.
Well, and when it's weird too, because with him, there was some allusion to the fact that like she didn't want him because he was too ambitious, which was amusing because that was the issue.
The criticism of her, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It just all feels really catty at this point, for lack of a better
It
term.
does. It really does, because like we've been talking about, like, what is the next step forward for the Democrats? Who is going to rally the party, right? Some people can talk about Zoran, but like at the fundamental end of it all, like him or hate him, the NYC mayor doesn't usually get a good transition to higher office after that.
Well,
Not
and he's kneecapped anyways.
Well, I wasn't even talking about president. I was just talking about like higher leadership within the
Sure.
party, even in that front. But that's, again, needs to be
Sure.
stated for everyone in the back. People have talked about Newsom, but again, like, people might like, seeing him get catty on social media. Does that translate into an organic base? I don't think so.
Well, and I'm really annoyed with like the amount of like online discourse surrounding him, where it's like, assuming he's the guy, like you'll vote for him, right? And it's like, well,
It's so astroturfed.
I
It's so
guess,
astroturfed.
but why, but why do we have to assume he's the guy? And why does like challenging the assumption that he's the guy, why is that met with hostility? Like, we have a primary process. He doesn't have to be the guy. I'm not sold on the idea that he is the, because like the thing is too, and I think the same was true for Joe Biden. When he won, that did not validate necessarily that he was the only candidate that could win. we don't know the counterfactual. We can never know the counterfactual.
Right.
But the general sense people have, right, is Trump in the first term was so deeply unpopular. I think that's going to be doubly so now, right? I mean, obviously we won't have, Gallup data backing it up, but I think, like, and the other problem too, and it's kind of weird with, we're focusing mostly on like who's going to be the person for the Democrats, and I think that's a fair angle to look at, right? Because I mean, if we want to be proactive, we would maybe want to focus on that. But there's this sense of, I don't know, I'm a little bewildered by the tactical choices that the Republicans have had
I
as of
agree
late.
as well. I agree with that as well. And I almost wonder, because again, we've talked about right wing ideology as a death cult. We've talked about it as the death drive. We've talked about this, that, and the third. I think there may be some implicit understanding that there is nothing for the party after Trump, right? They either go back to by their own logic, the cucked ideology of classic conservatism, or someone needs to find the mantle to Trumpism. And no matter how they spin it, it's going to be just that cohort that sticks on, and either the party fractures or whatever happens, right? Does Trumpism have a future beyond Trump? I don't know, to be honest. I really
Well,
don't know. But
I think,
here's what I was trying to get
yeah,
at. Go ahead.
I
So
was
what
gonna
I'm
say,
trying to get at is like I fucked up. I fucked up. You go first
no,
though.
that's fine. I was gonna say real quick. I don't necessarily know if it's so much the ideology. It's that I think that they don't see viability without him. But I'll let you go to your point, and then
No,
I
that you're
have
actually
maybe more.
that's the same that's an even better way to supplement what I'm about to say, which is, does it kind of feel like because they know there's nothing after him, whether it's electoral viability or him dying and this thing dying with him, that they need to get as much bullshit done as possible while they can. Strip it for as much copper as they can while they have the chance to do it. Um, Direct ICE to just maim and deport anyone they can. Get away with all the bullshit you can while it's in your power to do it, because they'll catch you in the bunker at some point. Trump has his bunker moment. He's compromised to a permanent end. Let's say we get lucky enough to have American Nuremberg, right?
Sure.
These guys probably get the sense that their days are numbered, or that they fear that happening to them. So it kind of fuels the cruelty almost, right? That they know that there's an expiration date on this.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting way to think about it because it's something that I mean I wasn't thinking about it exactly in those terms before because how else are you going to justify some of these actions, right? And like not just like the actions themselves, the capitulating to him in ways that I think are rather strange for like, okay, he's not going to be in power forever. Like that's abundantly clear. Whether he became a dictator or not, like he's not immortal. Um, and like no one's really positioning themselves, I think, to be a particularly noteworthy like successor. And maybe it's because of like you said, right? That the idea that like we're gonna have to go into major rebuilding mode anyways, or if we can ever, regain the halls of power. Or maybe they're just that delusional too, right? I mean, that's possible. Like I don't know. Anytime I see Mike Johnson speak, I kind of wonder, is he actually just delusional enough to believe what he's saying? Maybe. I don't know.
It's probably the middle of all of that. It's a fucked up
Sure.
Venn diagram to imagine. I'm certain, but
Yeah, there's probably like a category of like, for everyone's calculation, they fit into some combination of these.
and everyone's tried to map out the right since Trump's election, right? Like they tried to understand, the Bannon faction versus the teal faction. They try to,
Yeah.
sort out the evangelicals from the kind of nihilists. They try to sort out uh the traditional white conservatives with the intersectional Nazis, right? Like at a point, whether you want to see the Republicans as trying to do a right wing big tent, or whether it's an organic coalition of people that shouldn't be in the same room together, I don't know. But I try to do this thing where like I don't like to assume someone's actions are fully conscious, like they've planned and premeditated these things. There's a secret room of them and they all have planned doing it, because I have no way to confirm that. But I also don't like to fully cave into the perspective that it's groupthink, it's Dunning-Kruger,
Hmm.
this is random and wanton behavior that's up to chance. It's got to be somewhere in between the two, right?
Yeah.
And it just keeps coming back to the fact that like it feels like, much like when you look at the banality of evil explanation, when you look at, again, I'm just looking at this from the perspective of American Nuremberg. They're going to try to deny this left and right, whether this is Marco Rubio or JD Vance, previously anti-Trump guys, trying to come up with an excuse of, well, I was trying to stabilize things from within, whether it's the diehards that will mourn his passing and, be lost without him, whether it's this, that, or the third. They know that this was their window to get it done. And that's why Project 2028 read the way it did. That's why they're acting the way they are. That's why they're doing more brazen shit by
Hmm.
the day. Is it's almost like the thing we criticize the Democrats for, right? Where they will never
Yeah.
get it done while holding power. It's almost the opposite of, let's just keep pushing the boundaries and do the worst shit while we have a chance to do it.
Sure.
Because let's say American Nuremberg happens and we're tried for our crimes. At least we got it done. At least we did it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what they're thinking, but like it sure seems like it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a viable explanation.
So I think if we try to wish cast, I think American Nuremberg will happen, but it needs to be hosted by Steve Harvey. And I think it should be hosted like Family Feud.
There we go.
But I don't know. I'm I've been struggling to really keep up with things. I think I've had to deal with some shit this, like, through the end of the year, and now we're like I'm on the other side of it, and I'm trying to hold on, maybe selfishly, to that idea of improving things in your life is what you can do to help the world in a way, or at least get yourself ready to do it.
Sure.
So I've been really feeling like on the back foot on a lot of this, but I'm almost curious, like, what is it like for you teaching this as it's unfolding, right? What is it like for you, and maybe what is it like for the students, just kind of like bearing witness to this and trying to make sense of it in an academic
Yeah.
context, right?
I think it's really interesting, and I don't have the full student perspective. I don't think, for like, it's a pretty loaded class. But one of the things for this that I've really enjoyed with it is just kind of, especially as we were like kind of going through like, all right, this is how we got here. And now we're going through like different aspects, right? Presidential powers, how that's changed, things like that, and where Trump fits in. It's kind of interesting looking back and reevaluating things, right? I mentioned like the stuff with like the GOP 2016 primary that we went over. Like that was stuff that was like, yeah, like when I really sat down and thought about it, it was like, yeah, it's a little, yes, he makes sense, but identifying where the differences were, with him, I think is important too. And it's interesting, like kind of thinking about again, where it's like, there's that divide between Trump one and Trump two. There was the first term, I think, had this. I mean, definitely as a candidate, there was just sort of this quote unquote fun aspect to him, right? That like he seemed harmless enough, he wasn't going to get into power. And then when he did, I think, there was kind of reactions of both sides, right? Of like, wow, this is the worst thing that ever happened, or I'm not going to say there was necessarily the well, let's hear him out. I mean, there definitely was that, but I think that there was maybe some merit to like, well, maybe he's not going to actually like accomplish anything because he's an idiot. And we kind of went through that, right? Like there was some things he could, some things he couldn't get done. And even with this term, it's not clear to me what's, in terms of actual like accomplishments, if he's really gotten that much more done, right? He's been, I think, very destructive on both a personal and like just broadly political front. And I think that's deeply consequential. But in terms of, I think where we kind of classically conceive of, power is, quote unquote presidential wins are getting policy passed. I think he's demonstrating that there are ways that that view might be outdated.
Yeah. In a way, it just kind of feels like leading up to the Trump term, I think people remember the idea of the purge as like the movie, right? Where for
Hmm.
24 hours crime is legalized. And I kind of wonder to what extent that mentality is playing into this Trump presidency, where for 4 years you have full reign to just take it out on the people you resent. Because that's what we keep coming back to in this discussion is the pettiness, the resentment, the
Well, even I mean, I think like
re-
what really illustrates that too is the way he talks about using like federal aid. Well, why help them? They didn't vote for Trump.
right. It's everything about it is so nakedly oriented around politics of resentment. That's it.
Yeah,
If anything, like I know there's been so many disputes about is it fascism, is it authoritarian, whatever it is. It's very clearly a politics of resentment. The prescription is take it out on XYZ group because they're personally responsible for your misery. It's never grounded in policy. Like you said, it's not grounded in any policy that accomplishes anything. It's never really grounded in implementing a new service or a new institution or a new program that benefits anybody. It is solely about punishment. And I think in a society that's been shaped again by like post 9/11 reality, that's been shaped by war on drugs, war on crime, that's been shaped by
yeah,
Puritan morality from its founding, right? This is like maybe not the natural outcome, but this is the manifestation of all those psychic maladies in a way. It's
hmm
the manifestation of the society that feels the urge to punish, finding a
yeah.
convenient enemy because it doesn't see anything getting better. It doesn't want things to get better. What it does, in fact, if you ask these people, right, like, what is it that they need? They'll tell you, like, I'm not even going to imagine a voter. Let's not go that route. Let's go this route instead. People don't believe that they'll find a cure for their illness. They don't believe that they'll make more money. They don't believe that their home or their car could get fixed. What they do believe is that somebody got one over on them and it's someone that they view as lesser than them. It's always rooted in those stories of like refugees came and got a new TV, for example. That's one like I've just been hearing for years. You know, the real root issue that the person's explaining is that they cannot make enough to get these new items, or that they feel inclined to get new items, or whatever it may be, right? That never comes into the discussion, never gets painted. It is this idea that someone got something and I was not involved in the process to assess their worthiness. Me, however, I have problems. They might be real, they might be imagined, but because of that, I need to take it out on somebody. And because this is being played out on racial lines, we're seeing it this way.
Yeah. Well, I think we're also seeing it too, and it's I think become all the more pronounced now too. It's on ideological lines as well, right? Going
Yeah,
back to the ICE killings, right? The idea that these people basically deserved it, because they're liberal, because they are, they have some aspect of their identity that is left coded. Um, it's fine. And
right. I
I
mean,
think that's the part where it's, not saying that the racial resentment is good or acceptable, but I think that's the part that's going to lead into harder to disentangle spaces.
it's it's bleak.
Yeah.
It is a bleak politics that in some way we need to express our frustration with. We need to express the fact that we reject this worldview, that we cannot condone it, and that the people who operate within it should not be taken seriously. I know that that's not an answer, but I mean, what we've had three fatal shootings of U.S. citizens, six deaths in ICE custody as of 4 days ago. Um, all these precedents are getting set. We said this in the last episode, and we'll probably say this again, where it's like everyone knows that famous poem of, first they came for the X and I
Yep.
didn't speak up because I was not X. What's happening to you in real time, right? Is like they're coming for people who they deem illegal. As soon as they can't do that,
Hmm.
they start targeting people on the basis of race and accent. When that doesn't
Yeah.
work, they'll just go after anybody. It is an
Yeah.
excuse for these people to enact their violent fantasies. It is an excuse for them to get to play cop.
Hmm.
And they've done it on our streets, they've done it on our communities. What are you willing to put up with is the question that like I've had to ask myself in my personal life. And it's something that, oh my God, it makes it sound like I'm in a bad marriage. That is not why I had to ask myself that question. No, no, no. It's about work.
Double
Sorry.
recording today, and you're already,
No, no, no. That question was about work actually. But like, but again, like, what are you willing to put up with is the question that people need to be willing to ask themselves. What do I do in response to
Yeah.
that? Again, that is a hard question. What are you capable of doing? What can you do safely? That is hard to figure out. But I don't think, I mean, again, because we've joked about what does greenhouse gas lighting fundamentally mean, right? And we kind of use it as a shorthand for boiling the frog. Um, we're now all boiled frogs. We're frogs that are fully aware that we're being boiled. Are we jumping out? What's the plan? So at least like rejecting the framework
Yeah.
that's kept us as gaslit in the greenhouse, as it were, is the first step. And I I would just say that like if we're going to turn to the Democrats as a path forward, they need to have a comprehensive agenda. It cannot just be like the abundance playbook. It can't be vague platitudes with nothing in the answers. It's got to be something solid.
Yeah, and I think, looking back at Newsom again too, right? The fact that it's like, well, this is the guy who occasionally says some mean stuff to MAGA. Yeah, but then you juxtapose that with the guy who bends over backwards when Ben Shapiro challenges him. Like,
Once again, what are we doing?
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know. Like all I can really say is living through these times and being in a position where things have been rough, but I've had a chance to like really work on some of my personal issues and like
Your failing marriage, all that stuff.
my failing marriage. No, but I mean just like um there's a lot of ways people get tricked into not speaking up for what's right, or a lot of ways in which people feel pigeonholed into
Sure.
feeling stuck defending the present moment. And like I can speak to living through moments like that, right? And it is that question of what are you willing to put up with? Um, Trying to improve in those aspects is one way that like you still are doing something. Trying to develop the strength, trying to develop resiliency, is not a bad pursuit. It's also a sign of maturity to recognize, hey, it is a good thing to build resiliency, but it's also ridiculous to expect people to stay resilient in times like these. What you're seeing is demoralizing. What you're seeing is demotivating.
Yeah.
And it's not unrealistic or selfish to be bewildered. It is dizzying right now. And staying grounded is kind of critical.
No, yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's kind of the capstone for all of this, right?
Right. Is like against it all, like I don't have a prescription for this one, right? Like is the prescription log off? Is the prescription go do this? I think the biggest thing is like just recognizing how saturated our environment is with bullshit, right? And how do you stand firm on things that you hold true? How do you stand firm on things that you know to be true? How do you find ways to counter the narrative? It's it's something that behooves all of us, but it's something that takes a bit of time and care. And pursuing that is not something that you should frown upon or something that you should feel guilty about. I think a lot of people, and I, myself included, right, coming off of the unemployment wave of earlier this year, and if you're still unemployed and you're looking at these job numbers, it's brutal out there, right?
Yeah.
It's very desperate times for everybody right now. So
Well, and I think so many people employed too have this like overarching fear for just a various reasons, whether
exactly.
it's the specifics of what they do or something else, right? But like, especially if you're unemployed, just looking at the job market, it's like it really is not a winnable thing. And again, too, I mean, that's the kind of denial too that I think especially gets me is like kind of pretending that like all of this is fine, that it's working fantastic when it's like, the same people who were complaining about the price of eggs 2
Right.
years ago are now silent on the even more inflated price of eggs and other various things.
No, you're 100% spot on. And I think like that's the thing that's been the most jarring for me, and that's why it's been difficult to get consistent releases out lately, is because what my workplace is able to put people through is kind of ridiculous sometimes. I think the AI push has created a really unhealthy environment in a lot of industries where the worst people in corporate environments feel empowered to continue to be worse. And the overarching mentality, as we're seeing, if you're still employed or from people who for whom things have always been okay, is be happy you have a job, be happy you have the means to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And again, like I'm not saying that expressing gratitude's a bad thing psychologically, but you can't use that as cope to put up with abuse either. You can't use that to put up with
It always had kind of this like slave mentality anyways.
Well, and like there's that classic thing that's going around, like, a slave justifies their existence through productivity, and like I don't know if that has any right wing connotations or not, but I think that has been the dizzying thing about a lot of commentary lately. And I think like Chapo had an interview with somebody from Minneapolis, and they were talking about how they have a job where they work downtown and they're down the street from where Renee Good was shot, right?
Mhm.
And how one of the jarring things to think about is you could be unemployed and dealing with the precarity of these situations, or you could be employed and be dealing with the precarity of the situation, which is why I like to focus on precarity as a concept, because regardless of what circumstance you end up in, the reality either way is that you never really stand on solid ground unless you're a certain type of person with a certain type of income and a certain type of security afforded to you by your class position, right? So precarity is the defining characteristic for people, and I think like we said, we've talked about exhaustion before, right? Um, we don't talk about the reality of precarity breeding exhaustion. We don't talk about the fact that resiliency, which is a valuable trait to have, is a kind of, mark of maturity and a mark of, an ability to adapt to problems, is also sometimes used as like a stopgap for stressing and overloading people. And when we talk about capitalism as an extractive circuit, right? If you're at I mean, again, I feel like I've said this three times on this particular episode itself. If people are fully spent mentally and physically, and they're not in a position to critically examine why they're being extracted from, they're fully bought in hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
Anyways, I feel like I sometimes feel like I've gotten dumber, but also there's no need for me to do some of the stuff I was doing in previous episodes.
That's fair. Yeah, so I mean, I don't really have a whole lot else to offer on our
I don't know what else we can say.
current
That's the
affairs.
problem.
I think we've said it all. Um, we are seeing kind of resentment and pettiness kind of dominate the day. Um, I think most people are frustrated and have are right to be. Um, I don't fully, and I think my existential concerns are I don't necessarily know where this ends, right? Like I don't think it
Yeah.
ends with Trump out of office. I think it continues, and I don't necessarily know where we culturally go from there. But here's to 250 years. We made it. I guess not quite to the date yet, but yeah, that's where we're at.
I mean, so again, like, shouldn't that be a time to reflect on where this thing has been? Maybe it's time to change course.
Maybe, hopefully.
Hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, particle board, or whatever this is. But yeah, speechlessness is all I have. I don't even know how we end with this one.
I guess that speechlessness is like
That's really all we have, because it's
right?
like, what can we say other than fuck these guys? This shit
I think that's a good
sucks.
note.
Like, that's what episode 128. This shit
This
sucks.
shit's there we go.
I guess, yeah. I don't know how else to put a finer point on it. So again, thanks for tuning in, dear listeners. We will definitely catch you on the next one. Take care.